Today's lesson is Pegasus spyware targets journalists, others. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our program. I'm Roger.
And I'm Helen.
And today we're going to be talking about some nasty software out there that is trying to spy on us. And anytime you have some kind of program that gets into your phone, that's called spyware. You got to watch out for that. They're watching your every move. And so we've got this one called Pegasus, and that is supposedly targeting journalists and other kinds of people.
Yes. Now, Pegasus is the name of a mythical horse. It's a horse with wings, and it's a creature from Greek mythology. So here, it's the name of a spyware program. And spyware, you may have noticed, is a combination of two words, to spy, which means to find out secret information, and software, which is something that you use to make computers and smartphones and tablets and things like that work.
Exactly. There are all sorts of nasty software programs that try to get into our computers and into our devices. We've got malware, which tries to ruin our computers. We've got spyware, which we're going to be talking about today. And we also have ransomware, where they get in there and they control your computer, and you have to pay them a whole bunch of money in order to let them release their grip on your computer. So this one, of course, is spyware, and it seems to be targeting journalists, which are reporters and things like that. So they're after those reporters, trying to spy on them and maybe steal their stories and change their stories and stuff like that. It doesn't sound good, does it? So let's find out what this is all about. Let's listen to the first part, and then we'll come back.
Pegasus spyware targets journalists, others. News outlets reported in July that a piece of spyware called Pegasus was being used to hack the phones of journalists, human rights activists, and government leaders. The spyware infects both iOS and Android devices, allowing hackers to extract messages, emails, and photos. It can also remotely turn on microphones and cameras.
大家好。第一部分我们看到单字 activist， 这个字是名词，指行动主义者或是激进主义分子。例如 Local activists marched to force the government to end the war. 当地的行动主义者上街游行，施压政府停战。另外，除了上面的意思，这个字也可以当形容词，指参与社运的或是为运动发声的。例如 With all her activist pursuits, Sylvia barely has time for her family. Sylvia 从事社运工作，鲜少有时间陪家人。
So we're talking about spyware, a particular spyware called Pegasus, and this spyware is targeting journalists and others. So not just journalists, but other people. And it says here, news outlets reported in July that a piece of spyware called Pegasus was being used to hack the phones of journalists, human rights activists, and government leaders. So the news of this situation was reported by news outlets. A news outlet is a newspaper or TV company or a website that publishes news stories. So the story came out via news outlets in July that this piece of spyware called Pegasus was being used to hack the phones of not only journalists, reporters, also human rights activists. An activist is someone who takes part in activities like protests and demonstrations in order to achieve social or political change. So here we have human rights activists, people who are trying to defend or protect the rights of humans, of people. You can also have animal rights activists. If you're an animal lover and you don't want to see them get hurt or treated badly, you can become an animal rights activist and try to protect the rights of animals.
Right, and of course, this particular software program, this spyware, is trying to hack the phones of journalists and human rights activists, and also they want to hack the phones and computers of government leaders. They want to cause trouble, basically, and the spyware infects both iOS and Android devices. allowing hackers to extract messages, emails, and photos. So, yes, again, this is a kind of spyware. It's spying on you. You don't know it's there, but it's looking at you. It's gathering information from you, and it might use it against you someday. So they infect these different kinds of devices. Nowadays, of course, most of us, if not all of us, have smartphones. And those of us who are using Apple phones, the iPhone, of course, are using the iOS system. And everybody else seems to use Android. And this spyware infects both of those kinds of devices. So to infect is the verb. That just means something bad gets inside something else. Like COVID-19 infects lots and lots of people all over the world.
Yes, so for instance, you can say when you're sick, it's best to stay at home instead of going to school or to work because you don't want to infect others. You don't want to give others your illness. And since we talk about viruses, computer viruses that infect computers that get transmitted from one computer to another, you can also talk about infecting the computer with a virus.
Indeed. So in this particular case, we're talking about spyware infecting various kinds of devices. And the hackers, the people who control the software, those are hackers. They try to extract messages, emails, and photos, maybe videos and other things like that. So to extract means to take something out of something else. So for example, as you know, the Olympics took place during the summer and they extracted metal from various electronic devices to make the metals. They extracted gold, they extracted silver, they extracted bronze from those devices and made the metals with that recycled material.
Yes, so you can extract information, which means you can remove or get information from something, such as a computer or smartphone, or from somebody or from a specific place. It can also remotely turn on microphones and cameras. So this spyware called Pegasus can also cause the microphone or the camera on somebody else's phone to turn on remotely, which means it can be controlled from a distance, from far away, not directly. For instance, you have the phrase remote control, which is something that you use to turn on and off the computer or the air conditioning or the television from a distance.
So yeah, they can turn on your microphone and listen to your conversations, or they can turn on your device's camera and look at you and watch what you're doing. So be careful if you're afraid of some big, powerful companies or big countries in the world who want to get some information from you. You might want to disconnect the microphone or the camera, but that's a lot easier said than done. How can you have phone conversations if you've disconnected the microphone? So watch out for that kind of stuff. Okay, that brings us to the end of the first part of our lesson. Let's move on now to the second part.
NSO Group, the Israeli company that developed Pegasus, faced widespread criticism after reporters obtained a list of 50,000 potential spyware targets. On the list were many high-profile figures, including French President Emmanuel Macron. NSO Group responded by saying the spyware was used only by government agencies and only by countries with good human rights records. But investigations have found evidence of misuse.
第二部分我们看到动词 obtain 指得到或是获得。我们可以说 Jesse obtained a visa from the immigration office. Jesse 从移民局取得一张签证。或是 You need to obtain permission before you can enter that room. 你需要获得许可才能进入那个房间。另外补充一个同义动词 secure, S-E-C-U-R-E, secure. 举例来说I managed to secure a parking spot right in front of the building. 我设法在大楼前找到了停车位。接着我们看到单字 misuse. 这个字是名词，指滥用、盗用或是误用。例如 The social media site suffered from misuse because of trolls. 那个社群媒体网站因网络酸民而遭受误用之苦。另外，除了上面的意思，这个字也可以当动词，念作 misuse。有以下两种用法。第一，指误用或是滥用。我们可以说 The executive was fired after he misused company funds. 那名主管因滥用公司基金而遭解雇。第二，指苛待或是虐待，像是 The nanny was accused of misusing the child. 该保姆被指控虐待小孩。
So where did this spyware Pegasus come from? Well, NSO Group, the Israeli company that developed Pegasus, faced widespread criticism after reporters obtained a list of 50,000 potential spyware targets. So this spyware, this piece of spyware, I should say, was developed by a company called NSO Group. And this company is located in Israel. It's an Israeli company. And this company faced widespread criticism, meaning a lot of people, perhaps governments, were criticizing it and saying, you've done a bad thing, after reports came out that a list of 50,000 potential spyware targets existed. So reporters obtained a list of 50,000 spyware targets. They got this list. To obtain means to get something, especially by going through a long and difficult process. So these reporters, after having done their research, were able to get this list. And on this list were 50,000 targets. So a target is a person or a thing that you want to harm, that is meant to be harmed.
Yep, they managed to get this list of people to obtain it. For example, you might go to graduate school to obtain an advanced degree or something like that. But here they got this list of 50,000 potential targets. Israel, of course, is in a very insecure part of the world, so they're worried about being attacked from all sides there, so they need as much information as they can get. And on the list were many high-profile figures, including French President Emmanuel Macron. They could have information on other people as well, on Putin, on Biden, and whoever.
Yes, and these are all high-profile figures, meaning these people are all important people. They matter. They make a difference in the future and the relationships between the countries in the world. So these are high-profile figures, people who matter. Now, NSO Group responded by saying the spyware was used only by government agencies and only by countries with good human rights records. So NSO Group faced criticism. People were criticizing and saying you shouldn't have put out this piece of spyware because it's causing trouble and it's invading the privacy of a lot of people like journalists and human rights activists. So NSO Group, of course, had to respond, had to answer to these pieces of criticism. And the group said, well, actually, we created the spyware only to be used by government agencies and only by countries with good human rights records. A government agency is a government department or an organization in a government that performs a certain function. So, for example, the CNA, or Central News Agency, is Taiwan's national news agency.
Exactly. Of course, the most notorious agency in the government is the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency of the American government. So again, they were trying to have this spyware to be used only by certain government agencies and also by countries that had good human rights records. So, of course, we know there are lots of countries in the world that do not have good human rights records, where they torture prisoners and attack people and stuff like that. But investigations have found evidence of misuse. So, of course, people have looked into this and they've conducted some investigations. And when you conduct an investigation, you're looking for information that proves something is true or that proves something is false. And that information is called evidence. So they've conducted some investigations and they found some proof, some evidence that this particular software program is being misused. And the noun here is misuse, that some people are using this program to do bad things.
Yes, as an example of the word evidence, I could say there was not enough evidence to prove that the man committed the crime. So the man may not have committed the crime because there was not enough evidence to show that he did it. And since NSO Group was being criticized by people and by perhaps governments, they had to defend themselves by responding to these criticisms by saying, no, actually, we created this piece of spyware for good reason, to be used in a good way, but evidence has shown that that's not actually the case because the spyware has been misused.
Exactly. And of course, if there is this program out there, some bad apples out there are certainly going to want to get their hands on it. So it's only a matter of time before they can find evidence of misuse. Be careful with the word evidence there because it is a non-count noun. So you have to say much evidence or a lot of evidence, stuff like that. You can't say many evidences. Ooh, that hurts my ears even to think about it. Okay, that brings us to the end of the second part of our lesson for today. Let's go to the third part and listen and then wrap things up.
In late July, French intelligence confirmed that Pegasus had been found on the phones of journalists, among them a senior staff member at France 24, an international news station based in Paris. Forbidden Stories, a French media group, reported that as many as 180 journalists worldwide had been selected for surveillance. After the news broke, Macron ordered government investigations, and Israeli authorities inspected NSO's offices. Meanwhile, journalists were left to wonder whether their phones had been compromised.
第三部分我们看到副词 worldwide 指在世界各地的或是遍及全世界的。举例来说 She is known worldwide as an amazing actress and singer. 她是全世界知名的优秀女演员及歌手。另外这个字也可以当形容词，例如Climate change is a worldwide problem that affects everyone on this planet. 气候变迁是全球性的问题，影响到地球上的每一个人。最后我们看到名词 authority 指当局、官方，当作词义时常使用复数形，像是 Education authorities are reviewing the new plan. 教育当局正在检视新的计划。另外除了上面的意思，这个字当作不可数名词时指权利或是权限。我们可以说 People in positions of authority have a big responsibility. 身居要位的人责任重大。
So investigations have found evidence of misuse of this spyware called Pegasus, and let's look at some of this evidence. In late July, French intelligence confirmed that Pegasus had been found on the phones of journalists, among them a senior staff member at France 24, an international news station based in Paris. So French intelligence confirmed that Pegasus had been found on the phones of journalists.
Right, and of course there are different kinds of journalists out there who support different kinds of people. So maybe the Israelis would be interested in the information contained in the phones of journalists who don't support Israel, of journalists who support Palestine or things like that. So of course they're going to want to get that information and find out what they're thinking of doing, what they're up to. So yes, they did some research and they got some intelligence, they got some information, and it confirmed that these particular program, Pegasus, was on the phones of journalists. And Forbidden Stories, a French media group, reported that as many as 180 journalists worldwide had been selected for surveillance. So here's another media group called Forbidden Stories. They reported that up to 180 reporters all over the world. Worldwide just means all over the world. Like the COVID pandemic is worldwide, it affects everybody. They had been selected for surveillance. And surveillance means they're going to take a look at you. They're going to spy on you, basically, and find out what you're up to.
Yes, so for instance, you have surveillance cameras all over the place in some cities or maybe on the sites of some factories or big offices because you want to watch what happens in an area or watch the activities of a person to find out whether they're doing anything wrong. So this news group, Forbidden Stories, reported that as many as 180 journalists around the world had been chosen for surveillance, had been chosen to be observed so that their activities can be tracked. So here, this is another piece of evidence that the spyware Pegasus has been misused.
And here's the final paragraph for today's lesson. After the news broke, Macron ordered government investigations and Israeli authorities inspected NSO's offices. So as you can expect, Macron was pretty upset about that, so he ordered some investigations. Check this out, fellas. I want to find out what's going on. I want to get to the bottom of this. And, of course, we've got some Israeli authorities who got involved in this. An authority, of course, is somebody who's in power and they have the authority or the power to do something. So, yes, we got these people in the Israeli government. And they inspected the offices of NSO. That's the company that came up with this program.
Yes, so authorities can refer to people, an official organization. It can also refer to the police or the FBI in the United States who have the power to make people obey the laws. I can say, for instance, I saw someone riding on the MRT without a mask, so I reported that person to the authorities. Now, in that case, authorities may not mean the police because maybe the police aren't in the MRT stations, but I did report that person to somebody in the MRT station that works there that is in charge of keeping that place running smoothly.
Now, meanwhile, journalists were left to wonder whether their phones had been compromised. Here, compromised just means it has been severely affected and it can no longer work properly. Anytime you use your phone, somebody's going to be spying on you, so you probably have to restart the phone. You have to have all the software removed. You have to run an antivirus program or something like that. So, yeah, compromised means it's been badly affected.
That's right. And compromise can also mean to work together. When you try to find a solution that everybody can be happy with, that's also a compromise. But in this case, compromise just means to threaten or to risk harming something. For instance, you can compromise your health by breathing in dirty air or secondhand smoke.
Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today. Let's listen now to our Chinese teacher.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第一部分提到 Pegasus 这款间谍软体会感染 iOS 和 Android 系统的装置，让骇客得以截取讯息、电子邮件还有照片。他就写到 allowing hackers to extract messages, emails and photos。 好，这边的动词 allow 它本来有允许、准许的意思，可是在这里它并不是说那款间谍软体准许、允许骇客去做某事哦。那么 allow somebody to 加上原形动词，可以用来表达让某人能够怎么样，使某人得以做某事，使得做某事成为可能。举例来说， This app allows you to create your own Instagram filter。 这款应用程式让你可以创造自己的 IG 滤镜。好，那么另外课文用到单字 extract 来表达截取，我们来学习它的字首字根。好， TRACT 这个字根呢，它有拉、吸引或者是移动、拖的意思。像 tractor 表示牵引机啊、拖拉机的意思。那么在 extract 这个字当中，它的字首 EX 表示向外。TRACT 这个字根有汲取、拔出的意思，合在一起 extract 就表示取出、拔出，或是有萃取、截取的意思。我们顺便补充几个相同字根的单字。第一个是 distract， 它的字首 DIS 表示偏离，那么 tract 表示拉力。同学们可以试着联想哦，把注意力给拉走，把你的专注力呢从原本你专注的地方拉开，应该就可以联想到 distract， 它是表达使分心、转移注意力的意思。第二个补充的是 attract， 它的字首 AT 是来自 AD， 那么 AD 它因为碰到 T 开头的字根，所以才会拼成 AT。 好，那这样的字首它表示朝向，而 attract 表示拉力。很美或是很有趣的事物啊，就好像它们本身有拉力一样，会把你的注意力拉向它们，这样应该可以联想到 attract 它是指吸引或是引起什么的注意的意思。那么第三个补充的是 subtract，它的字首 SUB 表示分开， tract 表示抽。当我们把东西分离，把一部分把它拿走、抽走，这样子应该可以联想到 subtract 它有扣除掉的语义，那么 subtract 就表示减去、减掉咯。 课文第二部分写到，开发 Pegasus 这个软体的那间公司啊，遭到广泛的批评。那它是用 faced widespread criticism 来表达遭到广泛批评。那么 face 当动词就可以表达面临、面对，像是面临什么困难、挑战等等。那像我们可以说 face a difficult choice， 就是表达面临困难的抉择。还有一个用语是 face the music， 看起来好像是要面对音乐，那它其实是指说为你自己所说过的话啊、做过的事来承担后果，去面对现实情况，做好可能遭受批评或处罚的准备。好，那当我们在表达某人面对困难的事情时，可以用主动用法 somebody faces something 来去强调说某人他迎接、面对并且处理某事，就带有主动啊、正面迎击的语义。或者是你也可以用被动用法 somebody be faced with something 来强调说可能是在无奈啊、不情愿或是被动的情况下面临遭遇了某个困境。好，那么以上是今天的重点整理，我们回顾今天的单字吧。
Journalist. As a journalist, Harold has traveled to many different countries. Activist. Political activists gathered in the streets to protest the new bill. Infect. The virus infected thousands of computers in just a few days. Obtain. This course is open only to those who have already obtained a law degree. Agency. Paula's father works for the local law enforcement agency. Evidence. Your argument must be supported by evidence from the text. Authority. Sebastian reported the crime to the authorities.
Discussion Starter starts now!
Here's our discussion starter for today. Should it be illegal to develop spyware like Pegasus? Why or why not?
Well, certain companies and government organizations should be able to develop spyware, as spyware can be useful instruments in preventing war as well. So it really depends on how you use something, and you shouldn't blame the thing itself, but focus more on how it's being used by people.
Well, I don't know about that, Helen. Developing spyware like Pegasus should be illegal because it's only a matter of time before some bad apples get their hands on it, just like terrorists someday will get their hands on the hydrogen bomb. Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Roger.
I'm Helen.
See you next time.